Well, hunting season is concluded here in Kentucky, and all the rest of the meat is fully processed. But today I'm going to be grinding all the venison and preparing it to freeze for the year. Hey friends, it's Barbara Sue at Kowalski Mountain and welcome back to our channel. Now Philip has been working hard all season long to make sure that we had plenty of venison for the year, and he does all the processing that requires some skill. He cuts up all the steaks and roasts and fajitas. He's able to identify the muscle groups for the best uses of each kinds of meat, and then any of the trimmings that are left over get set aside for the ground. Now ground is super simple and it's something that I can handle. So today I'm going to go ahead and get all of this meat ground up. Now we've been saving the grind in the freezer so that we could do it just one time and knock it out all at once. Now first thing I need to do before I can start is I need a good weight of how much meat I have. Now we have a large scale that we use for all of our weighing, and this weighs up to 660 pounds. One of the best things about it is that the controls are on a long cord, so even if whatever I'm weighing covers up the plate, I can still read the monitor, which is really helpful with some of the things that we do here on the homestead. Now I'm going to put a tray on my scale and I'm going to tear that out. And that's going to help me collect any liquids that might be in these bags because they have been defrosting over the last couple of days. So I have my scale set up to weigh in pounds, and I'm just going to keep a running list of all the bags I weigh, and I'll total it at the end. Now I've completed weighing all of the ground venison and I have a total of 31.04 pounds. Now I've already processed about 11 pounds of ground into canned ground venison, and you can see that video right up here. Now the reason I needed to know how much the venison weighed is because venison is a very lean meat and it cooks rather dry. So we add fat to our ground venison, and we do that at 20%. So based on this measurement of venison, I'm going to add 6 pounds of fat. We get fat from our local butcher, and we just go in and we ask them to save us some, and they do. Now this is the fat that we got from our butcher, and they just save it in a bag for us. It does have little bits of meat left on it. That's fine. It won't harm our meat at all. It'll just mix into the grind and it'll just be perfect. Now I have some other fat that we also harvested from our own animals that we're going to use that as well. So I'm at 6.22 pounds, and that's plenty. I'm going to just use this. Now as I'm grinding, I'm going to grind that fat up in with the meat so that it mixes up really well. So before I get started with the actual grinding process, I want to do a little bit of prep. So this fat is a little bit too large to go through our grinder, so I'm going to cut it up into pieces that will easily fit in the grinder. And that way, once I start grinding, I will be able just to do continuous grind and not have to keep stopping to make cuts. Now we have a grinder that we got from Cabela's. Now you can purchase a grinding attachment for your KitchenAid or other type of mixing appliances, but if you're going to be doing a significant amount of grinding a grinder is definitely worth the expense, as it's really kind of hard on your mixer's motor. Now on my grinding attachment today, I'm going to be using the medium plate. Now we go a further step and we cover the machine with cling wrap, because throughout the grinding process I'm going to be turning the machine on and off frequently. My hands are not going to be clean, and that helps keep the machine clean itself. Now I do have a piece of this non-slip. I think this is for lining your cabinetry. I'm going to put that on the cabinet just so that the machine doesn't move. And then I'm also going to elevate the surface. I've got it elevated so that this is above my grinding tub. Now we process all of our own meats here at the homestead, and so we have some tools that make it so much easier. These big tubs definitely help with a lot of the grinding because we're dealing with a lot of meat at one time. Now my cabinet sticks out quite a bit, so I have to have enough clearance to this area, so I'm kind of on the edge of the counter here. Now I do have a cutting board and a knife that I'm going to keep right here on the side if I need to cut up any of the meat as I go, and we're ready to get started. Now grinding the meat is super simple. I just feed chunks of meat and fat into the grinder and I press it through. Now using the grinder is quite the workout. After a lot of meat, you're really going to feel this in your shoulder. Here's a really good view of a time when the fat was pushed through and it's being mixed into the ground meat. Now to thoroughly mix the fat through, I use my tongs to mix it in and break it up throughout the entire batch of venison. Now to make the grinding as easy as possible, it's really important to clean the meat well, to make sure you remove the sinew and the silver skin so that it goes through nice and clean. Now I've made it through all of the grind. Everything has gone through the grinder, and I just need to ensure that this shaft is also clear of any chunks of meat. The way that we do that is we take a little bit of the ground that's here in the tote and we just run it back through, and that ensures there's no chunks of meat left here in the shaft that is not ground. Now I've unplugged my machine and I want to go ahead and take it apart. There we go. Now you can see, you can see that shaft is all cleaned out. And then I have got a mass of meat right here around the end. Now I'm always really careful with this piece because I don't want to lose it. Now you can see where these big totes come in so handy. Now we do have lids for these as well. And that way, if I reach a point that I need to stop, I can cover my meat up and keep it nice and clean. Because cleanliness and sanitation is super important when you're processing your own meat. You want to make sure that you keep your kitchen as clean as possible because this is our food and we want to ensure that it's good for us. All right, let me clean up my grinding area and we'll move on to the next step. Now, we like to bag our meat in these wild game bags. This is a 1 pound package. And I also have 2 pound packages. Now I'm only going to do a few 2 pound packages only because that's a lot of meat for us. I'll save those for when I'm making maybe meatloaf that I use a lot of ground meat at one time, or maybe we have company and I need more ground meat. But most of them are going to be packed as 1 pound. Now I am going to set aside, and I'm trying to decide, I think I'm going to put 10 pounds of meat aside for burgers. Now I'm going to go ahead and press the burgers and freeze them, and then they're ready to eat whenever we need them. This is actually 9 pounds of meat, and I think that'll be plenty. And my container's full, so we're going to do 9 pounds. Now we have quite a few restaurant type containers that we use for processing our meat. It makes such a big difference because we process 100% of our meat at home. We don't use a butcher for any of our meats, and the right tools make the job so much easier. Now keep in mind, we've invested in tools over a long period of time. We didn't get them all to start with. It's an investment, but if you consider what it costs to process just one deer, you can easily recoup that investment with just a few years of hunting if you're an avid hunter or homesteader where you're processing your own meat. Now, after many years of doing this, it is easiest to take time to fold down the tops on your bags. And these bags, as much as you want to not handle your meat as much as you can and all that kind of stuff just for sanitation, these bags are not easy to fill any other way than with your hands. I've tried all kinds of methods. I've tried to make like a log and fill it with meat that way. You just have to stuff the meat in. Now we do weigh the packages. So I have my scale here, and I am going to be weighing my meat as I go to make sure that it's adequate for our needs. Now you will base the way when you package your own meat, you get to ensure that it's exactly the way you want it. Now it's also easiest to use a cup to be able to stand it up on the scale. That way it doesn't tip over, which really will become handy because I'm fixing to get dirty. Now I have another tub I'm going to put to the side. And as I fill them up, they're going to go into that tub. Now, this is an RV, so you have to get creative when you do production things in an RV. You just learn how to deal with it. All right, so let's get going. Now to seal the bags, we have this little contraption. And what I do is I first push the meat all down to the bottom. And then I turn it tightly. It has a slot right here. It goes down. And then I turn. And then I go down and it seals the bag. Alright, so I have 21 1-pound packages. I have 3 2-pound packages. And I have a little under 10 pounds of meat for the hamburgers, which is coming up next. Now the last part of my burger processing is to make burgers. Now Philip asked that I make the burgers to be 1/3 pounds. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to measure out the meat for the burgers so I can press them. I have my scale and I went ahead and I covered it with saran wrap. That way I have a nice clean surface to work on and it's easy to clean up afterwards. We use a lot of trays here in the kitchen. I really think this comes from Philip's Army days, but they really do come in handy for a lot of things. So first up, we're just going to measure out little balls of meat. Once I get a feel for the size of the meat, then it'll be easier to do it. Let's see. So this burger is just a little over 5 ounces, which is right at that 1/3 amount. So once I have my meat measured out, I'm just going to set it aside on the tray and I'm going to press it all at once. I'm already starting to get a good feel for how big it should be, and I know when it's going to be under. So I'm trying to aim at no larger than 5.33, but anything over 5 I'm accepting. So I got about 25 burgers and there was a little bit left over, so I went ahead and just added it to some, so some will be a little bit over. So now it's time to press the burgers, and I'm actually using a really old press. This actually came from my grandma, and it's not my normal press, so I'm going to see how it goes to see that I like it. So this is simple. I just put the meat in the press and I press. Now I think these burgers are a little bit bigger than my other press, but that's fine. Now I do think I'm going to get some saran wrap and cover this up because I'm getting a lot of mess. So now that the burgers are all pressed, I'm going to season them, and I'm just going to season them with a little bit of garlic pepper and garlic salt. Now that the burgers are seasoned and pressed, they are ready to go into the freezer. Now they're going to go in on the trays, and we're going to let them freeze. I'm going to say freeze solid, but at least handleable. We have found if you wrap them now, you squish them, and then they're not shaped correctly when you want to take them out. So we pre-freeze them before I package them up. So into the freezer they go. Now the venison is fully frozen, and I need to get it ready for long-term storage. Now my burgers still need to be wrapped. Now I use simple paper bags to organize my chest freezers. Now I should have done this before I packaged it up, but I do mark it as venison, and I do mark the year. That way I'm sure to rotate my meat. Now we do have ground pork and other things like that, so I don't want to mix up my meats. Now I usually have gloves for this, but I use them in the barn. My fingers are starting to burn. Now once my bag is fully loaded, I will take this up, and I forgot the tape in the house. Now the paper bag gives it an extra layer of protection against freezer burn, but most importantly, it helps me rotate my meats and make sure I use everything timely. So I also will label this bag of what exactly is in it. So it's labeled as ground venison with the year 2023, and this will go in the deepest part of my freezer, so I use the other meat first. Now if you're interested in how I organize my freezers, you can look at it right up here. Now once I package up the burgers, I'll be ready to stow these in the freezer. Now I'm in the final steps of packaging up my venison. So the venison burgers are frozen solid, so now it's time to package them up for storage. Now we do this in 2 layers. The first layer is going to be a saran wrap, and then I go over it with butcher paper. So I did cut some little pieces of paper to put between the burgers. And I'm going to package them in packages of 4 because that will work best for our family. Now I wasn't super happy with that, so I'm going to do one more layer. So since I only have a limited amount of workspace, I'm going to do all of it in the saran wrap, and then I'm going to wrap all of it in the paper. Well, that is the last of the ground venison wrapped and processed as ready-made burgers that we can grill up whenever we need. Now there is one left that wouldn't fit in a package, so I'm going to put it in a Ziploc in the freezer, and that looks like lunch. Well, friends, as always, we really appreciate you watching to the very end, and I hope that you've enjoyed grinding our venison with me as I prepare the food to preserve for the entire year. As always, we appreciate you watching, and if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, hit that button. We'd love you to be part of the Kowalski Mountain family. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.